The old chain rattled every time he moved. It was rusted, rough, and heavy, wrapped around his neck like a memory that refused to let go. The ground beneath him was bare, just a patch of dry dirt behind a collapsing shed. Seasons came and went, the world changed, but his world stayed the same, 6 feet of space, one crooked bowl, and silence. His name was Max, or at least that's what the collar said, though no one had called him that in years. He was once a puppy full of life, tail wagging at every sound, heart racing at the thought of adventure. But that was 8 years ago, 8 long years of waiting, 8 winters of freezing nights and summers of blistering heat. The chain had become his only companion, his only constant, his only truth. The sky would thunder, rain would pour, and Max would curl up under the broken roof, shivering, his fur soaked, his body trembling. Sometimes he'd bark just to hear his own voice, to remind himself he was still alive. But no one ever answered. The house nearby had long been abandoned. The people who once fed him had moved away, leaving him behind, tied like an afterthought. Days blurred into nights, nights into years. Birds nested above him, weeds grew around his paws, and his eyes, once bright and golden, faded into a dull gray of quiet despair. Then, one morning, the sound of an engine broke the silence. A dusty pickup stopped by the fence. A young woman in a rescue jacket stepped out, scanning the property. Her boots crunched against the dry leaves as she followed the faint noise of a chain dragging. Max lifted his head weakly, his ribs showing, his fur tangled. For a moment their eyes met, his full of fear, hers full of heartbreak. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling as she knelt. He flinched when her hand reached out, unsure if this touch would hurt too, but her voice was soft. "It's okay, buddy, you're safe now." She pulled out a small pair of cutters and began working on the chain, rust scraping against metal. Max didn't move. He just watched her, not believing it was real. Then, with one final snap, the chain broke. The sound was small, but to Max it was everything. He stepped back, hesitant, staring at the broken metal lying on the ground. His neck felt light, too light. The world suddenly looked bigger than he remembered. He didn't know what to do. He'd forgotten how to move without pulling against something. The rescuer sat still, giving him space. Then she opened her arms and whispered again, "You're free, Max." He took one slow step, then another. The air smelled different, fresh, wild, full of possibilities. His paws touched grass for the first time in years. He blinked against the sunlight. It was bright, almost blinding. His legs wobbled, unused to walking freely, but he kept going, one unsteady step at a time. When he reached her, he stopped. His tail twitched, unsure if it remembered how to wag. And then, after a pause, it did. Slowly, awkwardly, but it wagged. The rescuer smiled through tears and wrapped her arms around him. He didn't pull away this time. For the first time in 8 years, someone held him, not to restrain him, but to comfort him. The moment was quiet, but it carried the weight of every lonely night he'd endured. She took him to her truck, wrapped him in a soft blanket, and whispered all the things he'd never heard before. "Good boy, you're safe now. No one's ever going to hurt you again." He listened, not understanding the words, but feeling their warmth. As the truck drove away, Max looked out the window. The old shed grew smaller in the distance until it disappeared completely. The wind brushed against his face, and for the first time he closed his eyes not in fear but in peace. Days passed. At the rescue shelter, the volunteers cleaned him, fed him, and spoke to him gently. But Max was still learning what freedom meant. At night, he'd lie down and stare at the open gate, too scared to sleep, afraid someone might come to tie him again. It took weeks before he realized no one would. The chain was gone for good. Slowly, his fur began to shine again, his body regained strength, and his heart began to trust. When people walked by, he didn't flinch anymore. When someone said his name, his ears perked up. When a child laughed, he tilted his head, curious. And one morning, as the rescuer entered his kennel, Max stood tall, wagged his tail proudly, and ran toward her, not away. The woman smiled, tears in her eyes again. "You're ready," she said softly. A family had come that day, looking to adopt. They'd lost their old dog years ago and wanted to give another a home. When the little girl knelt before Max, holding out her hand, he sniffed it carefully and then rested his head in her palm. The girl giggled, her eyes lighting up. "Mom, he's perfect." The rescuer nodded. "He deserves this." That evening, Max rode home with his new family. As they reached their house, the car stopped by a large open field. The girl unclipped his leash and whispered, "Go on." Max hesitated for a second, then took off. He ran across the field, his fur glistening in the sunset, the wind rushing past him. His legs stretched wide, his heart racing faster than it ever had. He didn't stop until he reached the far end, turning back to see his family cheering and laughing. He barked, a loud, joyful sound that echoed through the valley. It was a sound of freedom. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Max lay in the grass, breathing hard, smiling in his own way. The air was cool, the sky full of stars. For 8 years, he had been chained, forgotten, and voiceless. But tonight, the world finally heard him. Freedom wasn't just the absence of chains, it was the return of hope. And in that moment, Max realized he had never truly lost it. It had been waiting, quietly, inside his heart all along, just waiting for someone to set it free.